It is early April, and I want to talk about the 2025 Typhoon season outlook. I'm meteorologist Robert Spetta. I do want to start off by saying, Westpac Weather, we are not an official agency, so always check in with your local meteorological agencies in the event that there is an incoming typhoon. Nor is this meant to be a forecast. It is a projection based primarily on what we have seen in past years, what we are seeing currently around the world and the basins, things like the La Nina or the El Nino. Also, just kind of taking a look at climatology, and there's a few oscillations I've taken into account here as well. So without further ado, the reason why you clicked on this video, what am I anticipating here in 2025 for the typhoon season outlook? And that being 27 named storms, 18 typhoons, 7 super typhoons across the entire Western Pacific basin. Now, if we're talking specifically about the Philippines, I do expect 20 typhoons to enter the PAR, with 10 making landfall in the Philippines. So slightly above average activity, expected mainly driven by a La Nina kind of switching to an ENSO neutral phase. Also, we have a negative BDO out there, with the peak season, of course, being in the later summer, early fall months, July to October. Now, we compare this up with average years. It is slightly above average, not a hyperactive season is what I'm anticipating. But for example, the average number of named storms is 26. I'm anticipating 27. Typhoons a little bit above, mainly because, and especially into the Philippine Sea, where we have well above average sea surface temperatures, could allow for some storms to rapidly intensify and get a bit stronger than what we normally see. That's why I am anticipating across the entire basin 7 super typhoons versus the average of 5.5. So how does that compare? Well, yeah, we typically get those 26 named storms, 16 typhoons, 5 to 6 supers. 19 to 20 storms typically enter the Philippine area of responsibility, so I'm actually right about average for that, with 8 to 9 landfalls in the Philippines. I am a bit above average for that, and that I'll explain in just a minute, but it primarily is due to the fact that we are in a kind of La Nina near ENSO neutral phase. The La Nina is weakening, but we're not quite to an El Nino just yet. So here's a average number of storms based on monthly activity entering the PAR during an ENSO phase. The point is, see there in green, the La Nina is much higher. You get a lot more storms entering the Philippine area of responsibility, and really just tracking further towards the south during a La Nina and ENSO neutral phase versus an El Nino. Right now, we are in a weak La Nina, and we probably are going to be staying in that kind of place, at least gradually shifting to ENSO neutral. The point is, it often leads to average or slightly above average named storms entering the Philippine area of responsibility, and just overall storm formation overall. What's driving that forecast? Like I mentioned, that lingering La Nina condition. Also a strong negative PDO, that is the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. Basically, when you have a -1 in place, it typically results and warmer sea surface temperatures and more storm systems, often correlates with a strong La Nina, in fact. Warmer than average sea surface temperatures in the Western Pacific. That's not just also associated with the current ENSO phase, but we're also just looking at above average sea surface temperatures that has been persisting across this basin here due to many climate factors, and you can kind of take away from that which you will. Enhanced monsoon activity in the Western Pacific, been seeing that a lot more as well as slightly above average already forecasted in the Atlantic. And now I point that out because this is one reason why I'm not expecting well above average storms in the Pacific. It has a lot to do with the Atlantic. The Atlantic's already expecting kind of an above average season. Now, you can get both basins being above average at the same time, but typically when the Atlantic is active and super active, the Western Pacific may not be super active. The Atlantic, they're expecting a slightly above average season, so I'm kind of levying and weighing that into all these other factors as well. So it's just some of my reasonings behind this. If you ask or you say, he's just throwing darts at a wall. Sometimes it feels that way, but there is some meteorological conditions behind what I am seeing and why I'm saying these numbers here. Also, as far as landfalls in the Philippines, the reason why I have that number much higher than a lot of the other things is because during a La Nina year, typically storms are these straight runners, these westerly track type storm systems. This, once again, is the average monthly landfalls and ENSO phases, and we often see storms during a La Nina move more so to places like Visayas, Mindanao, or recurve out towards the east coast of the Philippines. We've seen that in 2024. We had back-to-back storms at one point. Once again this year, a very similar setup, plus very warm sea surface temperatures continuing the Philippine Sea, which means probably going to see plenty of typhoons develop out there. So increased risk for sure of landfalls in the Philippines and really across Southeast Asia for that matter. You know, places like, Palau going to be mixed in here. And even if they track westward of Vietnam or southeastern areas of China, they're also now less more so for Northeast Asia. Places like Japan, probably, I mean, they could still definitely see typhoons, but it will be less likely based on what we're seeing here in early April. But more storms also could form closer to land, especially in the Philippine Sea, with possible rapid intensification. That Philippine Sea effect, we often say, that does develop with some of these storms. So timeline here, typhoons can form anytime. One thing we haven't seen is one form yet here in 2025, a little bit later than typical. But the first storms do typically form between March and May. So we still got some time here with the peak activity from July to October, so a little bit later in the year. This also showing the peak activity with about Cat 1 based on JTWC scale, the Saffir-Simpson. Cat 1 typically about 5 in the month of August. And also, if you notice, these super typhoons, Cat 4 or higher, also kind of peaking right around that same time frame. But one thing I want to take away from this graphic is look at January, February, and March. Yeah, there is they happen. It's not like it's a starter. And in fact, last year we had Super Typhoon Maisak, which was in just south of Guam in April, and you can see that there on the red. There is a possibility of storms like that in April over towards May and also into June. So the Western Pacific, it can fire up quickly and get very active, but at least at this time I am anticipating, based on my analysis here at Westpac Weather, of a slightly above average, but not hyperactive, but a slightly above average typhoon season. So take with this information what you will. It's based on my analysis. Of course, other people might say something different. Nor is this expected to be a forecast. Like I said, this is just a long range kind of methodology. Some people put out thresholds. I'd prefer to just put out exact numbers. It lends a little bit more at stake here, because anybody can put out a big threshold and kind of get it. I'm trying to get a correct forecast here. So with that said, let me know if you have any questions more specifically about it. Would you like me to talk in more detail about some of these teleconnections as well? Or what are your thoughts? Do you think I'm kind of out in left field, and do you think of something different? But one thing I do want to stress, and like I said at the beginning of this, is your local agency always is the official forecast. So if we get the 27 named storms and there's more storms coming, don't be like Robert said it was 27, we're good for the rest of the season. It's not the case. It's just a long range projection. And of course, I will fine tune these numbers as we go ahead throughout the 2025 typhoon season. I'm meteorologist Robert Speta. As always, friends, stay safe out there.